and then pass it over to Lindsay to introduce us.
Okay, I've got a brief description of the node and a few of the priority activities of the node as well that I'm going to walk through in a very abbreviated form. And then my goal would be for us to have a conversation, answer questions, and talk about your ideas. So the Health Systems and Services node is working to really identify the intersection of research and policy. How do we inform systems and services? And to catalyze changes that shorten the pipeline from research into effective and efficient changes in how physical health needs are identified and met among autistic populations. We generally seek to use large population level data sources so that we can examine outcomes from across diverse groups within service systems. And these findings most readily link us to opportunities for change and improvement. Activities of our node at the current state, although they will continue to grow and evolve and change, include cataloging health tools that are used by states for service and support planning, the use of big data to identify healthcare gaps, advancing the use of data to build capacity for additional research and dissemination into policy and practice, collaborating in key areas of interest, especially across our nodes, and engagement across stakeholders in the production of products that reach decision makers. So that is our abbreviated description of the node. Does anyone have any questions, or could we walk through your specific interests and goals?
I'll start, Lindsay. I'm Dina Gassner. I'm at Adelphi University on Long Island, and my dissertation, which I'm in the midst of, is looking at the experiences of autistic adults applying for Social Security disability. It'll be a qualitative study or possibly a survey. We haven't decided yet. I'm in the middle of everything. But what we do know anecdotally is that there's been a lot of reporting of huge barriers. And this has been compounded by COVID because the Social Security system has been completely decimated by COVID long haul people who appropriately may need to apply for services, as well as early retirees, and then a huge reduction in their workforce. So all of that has implications for our individuals. There's been research looking at the experiences of case managers and parents as they try to navigate this, but there has not yet been research looking at the experiences of an individual autistic adult.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dina. It's great to see you. And this interest, your focus on Social Security is so very important for all the reasons that you just mentioned. In particular, also the linkage across healthcare systems as well, because we know Social Security has implications for Medicare delivery under the age of 64. There's a variety of ripple effects of really understanding Social Security. Christy Anderson on the ATRP team produced the NAIR version that included data about Social Security and has produced a few peer-reviewed publications. And so if there's anything I can do to help link you to her in any way, shape, or form, and or to talk to you directly, Dina, we would love to have further conversations.
Yeah, I'd love to be part of that. I appreciate it very much. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you for your work. Really, what a valuable place to spend your dissertation. We are all wishing you well in that endeavor.
I have a different kind of biological clock now at 62. So.
Well, it's a clock nonetheless, right? And so we are all here to support your clock. Please feel free to keep me posted on how we can do that.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Absolutely. Jessica, Peggy, Ray. Hi, Ray. How are you?
Lindsay. Yeah, I was very impressed by Elizabeth and also Anne's presentation on the social services. I think at the end, I mentioned that if about the service disconnection after they graduated or after the change. So I had a thought. I think it connected well with your first point, that to connect the policymakers. So I'm wondering whether it's possible to develop some kind of toolkits for the children and the young adults with ASD and developmental disabilities and their families to be able to better navigate all the services provided by the states. I think it's a huge endeavor. I'm just wondering whether you can start with something small and also maybe collaborate with the states. I remember previously I talked with AIR-B when I first joined. I think they had some kind of, years ago, they had some kind of resource collection for the state level services for the children with ASD. So I'm happy to go back to Lisa to find out and also make the connection so you can talk with AIR-B.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right, Ray. This gets very complicated very quickly. So even if we think about Medicaid, states have different names for Medicaid. So it's called Medi-Cal in California. It's, you know, in some states use medical assistance. There are different issues around how Medicaid is interpreted and used in a state like Pennsylvania, where we have a loophole. So individuals can be eligible for Medicaid regardless of family income. There's a different identification of stigma associated with Medicaid when it's really only for individuals who are living at a certain level of the poverty line or with a certain degree of disability. So absolutely, this gets very complicated very fast because we have 51 states doing 51 different things, and that's just in Medicaid, let alone, as Dina mentioned, the nuances at the federal level across Medicare and Social Security. So, you know, we've thought a lot about toolkits. We actually have some new funding where we're going to be launching some state level indicators around performance across systems from birth through the end of the lifespan. And so the purpose of that set of indicators is to help families identify and navigate what's happening in their own state so that they have some benchmarking for what questions to ask around, in particular, cross-system navigation. I think that the really rich detail on Anne's presentation is that, you know, we keep talking about service systems. I know, you know, we're writing a grant where we're talking about service systems. We do a lot of one-pagers through our CERT collaborative in Pennsylvania, the Philadelphia Autism Project. And we use this language that assumes people know what we're talking about when we're referencing who is a service coordinator? What is navigating the service system even mean? And I think the point of Anne's study is that we need to take all of that back many, many steps and start to say, who comes to your house? Where do you go? What do you get when you're going there? Because we keep talking about speech therapy or occupational therapy, and I don't know that we need to put the responsibility on families to be the navigators here. We need to do a better job of helping to present information. So to your point, there may be some early omnibus toolkits where we can say, do some, you know, decoder ring type work where we say, when people are talking about service systems, here's what it means. And so when families are talking about who's coming to my house today, this is how you can take a step back and think about how to help them successfully navigate. And Anne's study was really eye-opening for me in that regard.
Yeah, maybe you can think about start from one state, maybe work with the family organizations or the families for those kids, and then start with incorporating their language and start with one state. You can develop tools for the other states to use.
Yeah, and we have a worm line in Pennsylvania through our state autism collaborative that helps individuals to be able to ask questions directly with peer-to-peer family level contacts. So, you know, I think that's helpful, but we have resources in Pennsylvania to do that, and that's not in place in every state.
If I can add to that too, one of the challenges we're facing is just, which is the framework of my dissertation, is intentional administrative burden, right?
Right.
They make these systems complicated under the myth that people abuse the systems, when in fact the abusive party in any navigation process is usually a provider. It's not the individual consumer seeking services. The research also supports that policymakers who have experienced administrative burden because of some hardship they've experienced in their personal lives are more willing to weigh the benefits from the deficits involved with administrative burden. Frankly, I wrote a letter to the president last month as they were talking about the need for systems navigators for COVID long haulers. And I said, if you have a system that needs a navigator, the system's dysfunctional and too obtuse. I didn't hear back from our good president, but I felt better for having written the letter, because that's fundamentally where we need to start, right? Is why are these systems misdirecting people? Why do systems not fully articulate what the expectations are? Why are the systems so incredibly dysfunctional? In my personal journey, I went to see a person who specializes in respiratory conditions to confirm whether or not I was eligible under autism for Social Security. Like, why wasn't I sent to someone who knows autism, right? So there's just basic breakdowns in how the system's structured to begin with. And the other nuance that, Lindsay brought up is every state is different. So if we set a model together around Pennsylvania, how that's going to present in West Virginia is going to look very, very different.
Thank you, Dina. Peggy, Jessica, I just want to make sure we have time. I know this is a sort of abbreviated session. I'm not sure if you want to chime in here. I know we've got a hearty discussion going, and happy to welcome your thoughts or to take it in a new direction as well.
Yeah, this is Peggy, and I'm from Wisconsin, and I'm with the Children and Youth with Special Healthcare Needs program in Wisconsin. And I think the question or the comments that I would like to have some discussion about at some point is really looking at systems of services that really do embrace full inclusion and supporting of belonging. And I had put a couple of things in the chat just on aspect of social connections when the speaker was talking about social capital and social wealth. But at the same time, there also needs to be systems in place that really do help persons feel comfortable and have aspects of belonging, like in housing, for example, is a great system. Yet at the same time, we typically segregate people either by the disability or by the age or by the income or whatever it might be, and then they're not inclusive, obviously. And so there can't be a natural kind of a support system built in if the housing were one that would be available to all persons, for example, equally. So that was just one example.
Right. Peggy, what a great point. How do we think about services and systems where, we talk often about hard defined health conditions. So the presence or absence of diabetes, the presence or absence of a pulmonologist. How do those words translate when we're talking about inclusion? How do they talk about, how do we think about these concepts when there is not a blood test for either the diagnosis or the social and community characteristics you're trying to put in place to maximize quality of life and participation? I think that's a great point. We've done some work in Pennsylvania using the Temple University Community Participation Measure, which has started to generate new data about activities and areas that are preferred across self-reported autistic individual survey data. I think that participation is only one aspect of inclusion. There's also, perhaps even some room for us to learn from researchers in the field of mental health who have begun to embark on measures of matteredness and other ways about tools that we can implement, and start to get also policymakers who might be more used to the diabetes conversation, the health outcomes conversation, where it could be a presence or an absence, and move that toward these new ideas as well, and really sort of break down silos across these different, the language and the concepts themselves. Thank you, Peggy, for that suggestion. That's incredibly welcomed in our node. And I very much look forward to, if you have other ideas or would be willing to dig in with me, I'd be happy to set up time to meet.
Yeah, it's just kind of an area that we're just looking at and dabbling in, and what it really does mean. People have talked about inclusion for decades, but utilizing it mostly, in a school setting. And what does inclusion mean? And certainly school settings have struggled tremendously with that as well. I don't think anybody is doing well. There are very few models that that schools have really showed great greatness for, I guess, in the area of inclusion. So there's issues there. But when you move into the community or other systems, you know, how can we take that and really embrace and embellish it so that it's easy to move from one area to another to, you know, be what you would consider fully included, from the shopping to the housing to the home to your healthcare to your school, and it would look really seamless.
Indeed, Peggy. Thank you so much. We're happy to have Wisconsin here in the room with us too. Part of the benefit, I guess, of being virtual is we've got people from all over the place here. So really welcome those thoughts. Jessica?
Yeah, I'll just say what interests me about this note. I think all of these topics are extremely interesting, and one of my colleagues was proposing an idea about inclusions in things like museums and zoos, and I think that kind of goes along a little bit with what Peggy was saying. My main interest is in making services accessible to families who are from cultural or linguistically diverse backgrounds. I presented at the rapid fire presentation. So I think just across many aspects of services, from identification to providing interventions, the transitions that the other presenters were talking about, there's just a big need to figure out how to make things accessible to speakers of other languages and people from other cultures.
Right. Because services exist in lab settings, but services also exist in community-based settings, and services are meant to, in particular with some of the most recent federal legislation around community participation requirements, the final rule, those community settings are key for thinking about accessibility. And I think also thinking about cultural and linguistic components is a place where autism research has struggled. We've had marked lack of engagement across diverse groups. And so that's a place where we need to up the bar. We need to be working even harder. And I think by doing it within a services and systems framing, we'll be very well poised to make and think about system change. I would welcome further discussion about that, Jessica. Thank you so much. That's a much needed area of both research, resource development, programmatic policy development. I mean, that is really across the board. I hope a place where there will be robust attention.
Yeah, and I can see it fitting into anything that was talked about.
Right.
Dina talked about how
true.
you need a navigator to access the system's too obtuse. Well, then layer that on to someone who doesn't even speak the language or have e-literacy to know how to navigate websites and on and on.
Well, and I think in terms of uniquely different community groups, establishing trust when we know that BIPOC persons have been marginalized away from being able to be researchers. So we have to build trust with those communities and try to establish a rapport if we're not a BIPOC person. And part of that comes from making it worth their time. I'm working with a group out of Detroit, and people are always asking them to be part of research, but they're not offering anything in return for their lived experience and their time and their energy and their effort. And so, you really have to create an exchange. I mean, that's culturally normative for them. And then we run up against AIR-B issues related to compensation. So we have to figure out a way to navigate those two cultural phenomena and break it down so that we can include more BIPOC persons in our research. But we also have to, come to terms with the reality that we need to keep encouraging people from different cultural communities to push up and through and into autism research.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for your time. I realize we just got the message that this breakout room will close in 1 minute. I welcome further conversation. Please feel free to reach out to me anytime. I will pop my email in the chat if there's time to have it here. And I'm also findable through Drexel University and through the AIR-P website. So please reach out at any point. I very much look forward to the next steps, and hopefully, in the coming years of this same conversation, we'll have new things to talk about. We won't keep having the same conversations related to the need for systems and service change. We'll really be making advancements together. So thank you for that.